children's stage. Never mind.
Okay.
Is that the box to the first one? Over there.
Yes, it is.
Just tell me when you want me to read it, too. You can tell.
Okay, go ahead, you can read it.
May 4th, 1995, Elsa Federbush. Interviewer, Janice Sussman. In Scarsdale, New York, USA. The interview will be done in English.
Okay.
See that?
Okay,
Will her voice pick up?
what?
She has to read. Basically, she says this again, her own words. She says, you know,
Okay, you can read it again, Janice, I guess.
May 4th, 1995, survivor, Elsa Federbush. Interviewer, Janice Sussman. Scarsdale, New York, USA. It will be done in English.
The pronunciation of the name is not correct. You say Federbush. It's not, it's Federbush.
Okay.
So now what?
Okay, you can begin.
Elsa, please tell me your name at birth.
My name at birth was Eliška Ružena Šternova.
Did you have any nicknames?
Elzush.
And your birth date?
My birth date is December 13, 1930.
And how old are you now, please?
I'm 64.
And what was your country of birth?
Czechoslovakia.
Elsa, what was life like before the war?
It was nice. It was fun. Before the war, my father owned a business, and we had a good life. We were a nice, large family. We were 6 children, and we lived in a house that was around a square yard that was surrounded by people just like us. And the rabbi lived in the same yard, and we had a lot of friends. And I went to kindergarten and visited with friends, and we ice skated on the streets. I was 5 years old when I learned to ice skate. And the area where I come from had really severe winters because we were below the Carpathian Mountains. And most of us skied and ice skated because of the surroundings. And we would go out and line up across the street. Of course, there wasn't much traffic because the town was small. It was called Svalava. And we'd skate right down the main street, arm in arm, whole bunch of us. And we went berry picking and mushroom picking. And we went to school. And my father had a general store. You could get anything there, from textiles to guns for hunting to exotic fruits which were not available in our parts. And of course candy. My friends loved to come to our house because we'd walk into the store and just put our hands into the candy jars, and fill our pockets. My mother helped my father in his business, and she also crocheted and made our clothes. And Fridays she'd bake all kinds of pastries. It was the big day for baking Hungarian pastries. When she was a young girl, it was Austro-Hungary, so she spoke Hungarian, so did I. And she baked all those delicious pastries that I can just smell them now, the whole house. And she made her own chali, the braided chali, and all these memories. I used to hate Fridays because there was such a commotion. I liked what was the after, what came after, the desserts and all that, but it was cleaning and cooking and, baking. My father, we were Orthodox, but not extreme Orthodox. In other words, my father didn't go to shul every day, he went Saturday, but everybody was like kosher, and Saturday was a big day. So there was a lot of preparation for that. And I was the youngest, so they didn't take me too many tasks. I would like peel potatoes, sit with a basket in front. It was a big family, so we needed a lot of potatoes. So they would set me on a little stool and a basket in front of me for the peels and the potatoes on the left, and on the side there was a big bowl of water, and I would peel and peel and peel and sing. And I can't sing. I have a terrible voice. My sisters used to yell, "Will you be quiet already?" Because you can't sing. And just because they said I should be quiet, I kept singing. And they reminded me just recently, when we were together, about the songs that I used to sing. You know, the peasants where I come from were Ukraine. And they had like a mixture, a language between Russian and Czech and Hungarian. It was a real mixture, and they had their specific songs. And in the summer, I would go. They would send me to my grandmother, to a small town called Poroshko, or Poroshkovo was in Czech, and Poroshko was in Hungarian. It was quite confusing. And I would go there for the whole summer. And my grandmother, who was, I remember, she was always an old lady. I don't know how old she was. She might, well, at the middle of the war, she must have been like in her early 80s. And I used to want to do what all the other children did. The peasants did, walk barefoot on the streets and all that. It's fun. And she wouldn't let me, and I would sneak out and do it, and somebody told on me, and she was very upset. And, you know, what else do I remember? Oh, yes, we would go berry picking up in the mountains, and you'd hear these people singing, the peasants. It was unbelievable. And now I think, then it didn't mean anything, but now when I think back, it was so beautiful. You know, you didn't see anybody, you just heard a lot of voices singing, and you knew the songs. They were so typical. And my grandmother wouldn't let me go berry picking, so I went without her permission. And before we got back, there was a tremendous downpour, and the river that we had to cross was flooded. And we couldn't get across. So one of the women carried me on her shoulder, we finally needed, but somebody ran to my grandmother and told her that I had drowned in the river. Well, she almost... When I got home, guess what she did? She took a dish towel and she beat me with a dish towel. Like, you know, I mean, she sort of let her anger out by pretending to give me a good spanking, or whatever you call it. And things like that. We would have to go up, oh yes. The village that she was in was high in the mountain, and you had to go on what was called a serpentine. The roads were very snaky. And the bus could hardly make it. We would have to go out and push. You know, it was so funny. But we finally made it. And life was good up until 1939.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have, at that time I had six. We were four sisters and two brothers. And we were ready to leave before the war. What happened was my father had a brother in Chile, South America, and a sister in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And we were going to go and join them. So my father sold his business, and my uncle wrote that all the girls need trousseaux because it's not available there. So my mother hired a seamstress, and she also got a tutor to teach us Spanish. And we were all packed in huge crates and like big baskets, woven big, like they looked like a square. They were square, but very huge. And we were all packed to go, and we were supposed to leave when the war broke out, and we were stuck. So, you know, we missed it like by 2 days, because the boat was sailing from Italy, I think like the 2nd of September or something, and the war broke out and we couldn't make it. So we had to start from scratch. The business was gone. Most of the money was gone on the fair and on the, you know, the clothes and preparations, you know. So we moved from Svalava to a town called Uzhhorod, or in Czech, or Ungvar in Hungarian, because my father had a brother there, and my father worked for him for a while. And we took an apartment, wasn't big enough for all of us, so we were shipped out to one grandparent, to another grandparent, and I spent the whole year with my grandmother because there was no room where we were. It was tough. And we weren't bothered at that time, this was 1939, we weren't bothered too much by the war at this point. It was still Czechoslovakia. And then my father decided to move to Munkac. It's a much bigger town, or Mukačevo in Czechoslovakian. It was a bigger town and possibly more opportunities to make a living. But we rented an apartment, it was okay. I mean, it was bigger and we were all able to come back and go to school, home. And my father got himself a partner, a non-Jewish gentleman, and they were selling used clothing on the market. Wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Then my grandfather, to help us out, he owned a house in Munkac, and apparently the tenants who were there had left or whatever. He let us move in there. Well, that was a great improvement because it was much larger. We had beautiful lilac trees in the garden, and he sent us a cow to the city so we could have milk. And we rented a piece of land so we could take the cow to pasture. So every morning, across Main Street, there goes the cow, and the cow's name was so funny. The cow's name was Muncie, which was my sister's name. And she was very upset about it, of course. It's like Elsie the cow here, and my name is Elsa, you know, so it was unbelievable. She was very upset about it, but that was the cow's name, and we couldn't do anything about it. Anyhow, we had a stables in the back. The house was nice and good size. Oh, let me retract a little bit. Before we sold our business and everything, we also had a garden with fruit trees. And my grandfather sent us a young girl from the mountains who helped my mother because it was a big family in a big house. And she would milk the cow. We had a cow there too. And I would go with a twig or a branch from a tree, try to keep the flies off the cow so she won't kick the bucket, or she won't get her tail into the milk from being bitten by the flies. And what else do I remember? School was fun. I had a lot of good friends, and I was a good student. And we visited each other, and we played games like children do. And my mother used to make her own preserves and her own sauerkraut in a barrel. And all the neighbors were involved. Every time somebody prepared for sauerkraut, you called the neighbors, you lined a room with white sheets, and you had 2 barrels and a slicer on top of it. And 2 women sitting on the end of the slicer, and there was a big sheet on the floor to catch the cabbage, and they would sit and go back and forth with this slicer or grater or whatever you want to call it. It was like a big knife in a frame type of thing. And everybody would come in and, you know, help, and we would put up a big barrel of sauerkraut with green tomatoes in it, and pickles, and it was good. It was very good. And my mother baked her own. We had an oven, big oven, and she baked her own bread Thursday mornings, and then she would make, I love that breakfast, she would make like, almost, it looks like a bialy, but it was bigger, and it had onions on it. It was crusty and with a lot of butter. It was great. I loved that. And let me see what else. You know, I was so young. It's so hard. Certain things stuck in my mind. Others, well, I guess I forgot a lot. But then in Munkac, I had to make all new friends again. And schools changed so much because I went to Czechoslovakian elementary school for a few years. When I was up in my grandmother's, I had to go to Russian school because that's what the peasants spoke. I didn't even know the alphabet. And I got an A without even knowing the alphabet because the teacher lived in my mother's house, my grandmother's house. It was so funny, these things, how I remember that. And why did I start telling you about that? Oh, the schools. And then when we went to Munkac, I had to start Hebrew school. But this was a regular school, but everything was taught in Hebrew. It wasn't like a religious Hebrew school like we know it here. It was a regular school. They had high school, Hebrew high school, and they had Hebrew elementary school. So once we were there in Munkac, I was able to go to a Hebrew school. My middle sister traveled from where we lived in Sualava to Munkac to go to high school, to Hebrew high school, every morning on a train. It was about 25 kilometers, but the trains were very slow then. So it took a long time. And my sisters, they all went to different schools. It was such a melange of schools around. One went to Russian school, one went to Czechoslovakian school. And of course, then our education was interrupted. And we were not allowed to go to school anymore. So,
why were the Jewish schools separate?
because it was allowed, you could have any language school. It wasn't because they didn't want the Jews in regular school. There was no question. You could be anywhere you wanted to be. It was your choice. We really had very little anti-Semitism in Czechoslovakia, because there was, but schools were not segregated. You could go anywhere you wanted. Of course, the peasants, there was anti-Semitism, no question about it. When Easter would come along, we were afraid to go out on the street, because supposedly we used Christian child's blood to make matzah, and they would, beat us up, or throw stones at us and all that. So the peasants were nasty. But in the cities, we were allowed to do anything we wanted to, and you could even go to university. We didn't have one in Munkac, but there was one in Bratislava, which wasn't far away. That's where my aunt went to school. And we visited relatives in town for this. Like my aunt lived in another town in Bereksaz or Berehovo. So many names because of the changes. And she had a vineyard, and we would go up there, and it was just beautiful. And fruit trees, peach trees, huge, humongous. I don't know why that sticks in my mind, but big. I've never seen any big peaches like that here in the United States, but they were so huge and fresh off the tree. And that was fun. And what else can I remember? Oh, life was, as far as I was concerned, life was good. My parents, I'm sure there was times when they were struggling, but as a 9-year-old or 8-year-old or 7-year-old, it didn't bother me because I had everything I needed, and we would get new clothes for Passover and new clothes for the fall, for the high holidays, for Rosh Hashanah. And one thing I did, I wasn't very happy. In between, I would get hand-me-downs from my older sisters, and I wasn't very happy about that. So one year, my mother, to make me cheer me up a little bit, she crocheted a Tyrolian skirt for me with flowers on it. And I never forget when I went out with that thing first, with an organdy blouse with big puff sleeves, and they looked like the lederhosen, the Swiss or German lederhosen, but made out of green, because that was the color of the Tyrol, from green wool with a band of beautiful flowers near the hem, and suspender type thing, and a big bow in my hair, also organza, white bow, and we were walking down the street, and a lady stopped us, and she said, "Oh, doesn't she look gorgeous? I mean, I wasn't that gorgeous. It was the way my mother dressed me. And my mother says, she said something in Hungarian, they say, not to get the evil eye, you know. And I couldn't understand what she was saying. So she explained it to me, that if, like a baby or somebody, if somebody says something, they may not mean it, and it may give you the evil eye, or you know, superstition. And I would enjoy watching my mother getting ready Saturday mornings to go to temple. She was very elegant. She wore a sheitel at the beginning when I was little, but then she let her hair grow. And I was lying in bed watching her putting lipstick on, and I was saying to myself, gee, when I grow up, I want to do the same thing. I must have been 5 or 6 years old. And she would go every year to Yugoslavia, to a spa in the summer. It was good for all ailments, supposedly. And we would wait, she'd bring us gifts from Venice. And to us, it seemed like it was fairyland, because she'd come back and tell us stories and bring us those lovely glass blown, you know, beautiful glass vases and necklaces made out of leather, some flowers, all the crafts that they did in Yugoslavia and Italy those years. And she would have an old lady come and take care of us and cook for us. Her name was Friede. And we didn't like the way she cooked. So we were very unhappy. We couldn't wait for Mother to come back. And what else did we do that was fun? Oh, we had a river running across our town called the Latorca. I don't remember what the Czech name was. And we'd go swimming on the banks with a whole bunch of kids. We were always a whole bunch of kids, you know, always together. And horsing around, fooling around, just like everywhere else. And I didn't swim too well, and I was afraid to go. And somebody pulled me in, and there was like an undertow, and I almost drowned. It was horrendous. I still don't swim well. I just about stay afloat, but I really lost all taste for it. And what else?
What was the first sign of danger?
The first sign of danger was when they chased out the Czechs, the Hungarians. See, that used to be Austro-Hungary. And after World War I, they divided up. They gave that part to Czechoslovakia. They created Czechoslovakia. And that was part of Czechoslovakia. And the Hungarians were never very happy about that. Excuse me. So in 1939, when Hitler came into power and started the war, the Hungarians were on Hitler's side. So they were allies with Germany. So they wanted it back, and they took it back. They marched in one day, and the Czechs left. Now, when the Czechs were leaving, they were all customers of my father's, you know, in the store. All the officials and the whole government, whatever there was. And, oh, I never forget that. One fellow, we also had a gas pump, and they came to fill up as they were pulling out. And this one officer, Czech officer, came into the house to say goodbye, and he pulled the gun, and he was going to kill himself. And my father threw himself at him and stopped him, and the bullet went into the ceiling. Gee, I was so scared. It was we all cried. It was such a sad time to see them go. We grew up with them. They were our people, and all of a sudden they had to leave. Now, the people who lived there were also Czechs. We didn't have to leave, but the government, the people, the military, they had to leave. So, and that's when we knew that it's going to be bad.
Where did they go?
They went to Czechoslovakia proper, further into Czechoslovakia. And it was so funny. The Hungarians marched in, and we lived on Main Street. And my brother, the one a little older than I, went up on the roof to get a better view. And he wanted everyone to see that he's up there. So he went cuckoo, and the Hungarians were wearing feathers in their head. And cuckoo, like you crowing like a hen, you know, or whatever you call them, the male part of the hen. And the Hungarians thought that, you know, they wore these elaborate feathers, you know, made out of, I don't know what feathers, but they were beautiful, very black and green. And so they thought that somebody's making fun of them. So civilian clothes police came to our house and wanted to know who is on the roof. They went up there and brought him down and dragged him down. He was, what was he, 10, 11 years old? And they were going to take him away. And of course, my mother threw a fit. She started to cry. She says, it's only a little boy. He doesn't know what he's doing, et cetera, et cetera. So they let him go. But it was so scary. It was unbelievable. And the funniest part was that my father was in the army. He was a sergeant major first in the Czechoslovakian army and then in the Hungarian army. And he wasn't dismissed from the army till 1940 or 41. As a Jew, he was still in the army. And I was so proud of him. He had a long saber, white gloves, walking down the street in his uniform, you know. And I was holding his hand, and I thought he was the handsomest man alive, you know. And then no more Jews can be in the army, and that was it. So he became he wasn't in the army like a steady army man, like a regular, but they did have to go every so often on parades and things like that. I guess it was just for show. And
Is that when your trip was prevented?
yes, our trip was prevented around that time, yes. So we were stuck and we had to struggle all over again. But I didn't suffer much. What else is there? Oh, well, that's it about my grandma. Oh, yes, I had my other grandparents lived in another town. Also, I used to go there, and it was a totally different setup. That wasn't in the mountains, but it was beautiful. They had also a river running in front of their house, and they had horses. I wasn't allowed to ride, but my older sisters were. And it was good. It was a good life. What else can I say? That's about it. Am I finished? I don't know. That's all I can really think of.
Okay, we're going to change it.
Let Melvin leave first, please. Melvin,
1 second,
we can hear you.
I'm taking everything out and I'm going.
Okay.
May 4th, 1995, survivor Elsa Federbush, interviewer Janice Sussman in Scarsdale, New York, USA. The interview will be in English. Take 2. Elsa, how did your life change after the occupation?
Well, what happened was it started gradually. The Germans didn't really occupy us at the very beginning of the war. I think they occupied us in 1940 or 41. But the Hungarians did a good job of making our lives miserable. They were not much better than the Germans. And we had all kinds of, first of all, they took all the Jewish businesses away. Nobody was allowed to have non-Jewish help, like no maids, and nobody was supposed to associate with the Jews. We had only certain times in the day that we were allowed to go out to shop. We were restricted to which shops we could go to. And we had a curfew. We had to be in by 6 o'clock. And as it went on, it got worse. There was no flour available. There was some kind of an imitation flour and corn flour that was mixed, and that's how we baked our bread. We were not allowed to go to bakeries, and we were not allowed to go to school. So we did have, not even to Hebrew school was forbidden. You mean the regular Hebrew school was not allowed. And so our education got interrupted, but we managed to create little groups and have the teachers, sneak lessons and teach us. So, we were afraid to go out on the street. There was a lot of soldiers around, Hungarian soldiers. And then this went on for a long time, and we were not able to associate with our friends as much because they lived all over the place, and it was hard to get to them because you were afraid to go. And you had to walk because there was no transportation in towns like that. It was a long walk, but you made it normally. So we missed our friends. Everybody was stuck in their little area. And of course, food was not, we had potatoes because we had a cellar where we stored some food, and we had to sort of ration it because it was running out. All the preserves my mother put up, and all these, after a while there were none left. So it was a meager diet, but we were not hungry. We managed, we weren't hungry. And of course travel was restricted. You couldn't go to another town or just do anything. You couldn't go swimming. All the fun that we had, I'm talking from a child's point of view, was sort of cut off. We were limited to a very small area and very few hours. So, but we managed to find and make our own fun. That's what life is like. You adapt and you do your best. And we were quite resourceful as children. We made our own games, and in the winter we poured water in the yard, in that square, so it froze, and we had an ice skating ring. So we were able to ice skate. We couldn't ice skate on the streets anymore, and we couldn't go skiing. We did go swimming every once in a while, but in a sort of a sneaky way, through the back fields and all that.
What were your brothers and sisters doing?
Same thing as I was doing, except with the older group. My oldest brother went to Hungary, to Budapest, to learn a trade before the war broke out. And he was there. He was there all through, we didn't see him after the war broke out. We never saw him again till after the war ended. And, my oldest sister was sent to learn, to a seamstress, to learn how to sew. She hated every minute of it. She didn't like to sew, and she still doesn't. But my mother felt it's very important that you should have something that you are able to do when you need it. And my other sister, she was a wild one. She was all over the place. She liked to cook. She would get up in the morning and watch my mother very early to bake bread and all that. She helped my mother. My other sister was not at all interested in housework or anything like that. Since we had no maid anymore, we all had to pitch in. Everybody had to do their share. And my oldest sister didn't want to, was reluctant, so she was sent to a seamstress. And doesn't mean that she didn't become a very good cook and homemaker. She's excellent. She lives in Israel and she does wonderful things. Anyhow, so we actually didn't do anything. There was no making a living. You lived from what you had accumulated from before. And you did little things, little deals here and there. You tried on the quiet. You sold a lot of the things you had. I mean, what did we need all that trousseau business for, you know? So we sold to some non-Jewish, some Gentile people, all those elaborately embroidered sheets and pillows, and oh yes, and we had, my mother had made, we were going on a boat, so what was very much in style then was the pajamas that you wore during the day, like palazzo pants today. So she had a seamstress come to the house and sew all those things. Now, who needed that? I mean, in the situation. So my father was slowly selling all these things so that we have some money to buy whatever you could get. And we had enough clothes because we prepared for the trip to South America. And of course, we still had our cow. They didn't take that away. I guess they didn't know we had it. And we had our fields. We had corn growing, and we grew vegetables. So that was okay. That helped, you know, that helped us. And we also shared with a lot of people who did not have gardens and who did not have. My mother was very charitable. She did a lot of good things. There was an organization called the Beit Yaakov, like they have now here, the Hadassah or Ort or something, and they would collect for the poor. They would have monthly meetings and see how they can help the poor. Everybody helped them. Everybody knew everyone else because it was a small town. But once we moved to Munkaj, it was a much bigger town and didn't know too many people. There was no field, and there was no cow at first, there was nothing. But my father managed to go to the market there. They had, in the square, they had like a flea market or something like that. And also there, it was like all the peasants brought their wares in, like on Thursdays or Wednesdays. I don't remember the exact date. So he would go and manage to do some business here and there on the, you know, but the risk was always there that you're going to be caught. But you had no choice because you had to eat, you had to feed your family. And then when we moved to Munkaj, I got to make new friends and we were taken to the ghetto. Now the ghetto was a small area in town, and all of a sudden, all the friends who were all over the place, all of a sudden we were together in a small, confined place. We were in a one-room apartment, like 3 families, you know. But all my friends were right there for me to play with. You know, we thought it was great fun. It was, you know, usually I would have to go, like, walk a half an hour or so to get to my best friend's house. She was right there. And it was awful. I mean, but we, you know, kids, what were children?
Who moved you to the ghetto?
The Germans had come in already. And they, together with the Hungarians, the Germans, before we moved to Munkaj, yeah, I forgot that part. No, wait a minute, no, that was in Munkaj. We had a fairly sizable house, and we had that cow in the stables, and the Germans came to look for lodgings, for places to stay for the men and for the officers. And they came to our house, and they wanted to stable their horses. And my father couldn't say no, he had no choice. But he also wanted 2 officers to live in the house. So my mother said, look, we are a big family, there is no room. He says, well, you'll have to just make room. And they took over 1 room, and they stayed in our house. But they did not, they were Wehrmacht, they were not SS. And they were very polite, and they did not intrude. And we offered them, you know, certain things. We had very little. They would never accept, but they were very civil. And then when I guess they were moved out to a different area, they left. But that's the time that we had them in our house. And when they took us to the ghetto, they didn't give us much of a chance to take much along, you know. It was all very sudden. And rumors were going around for a while that we were going to be taken away to another area for something. We couldn't understand it. We heard rumors from other towns that they were gathering the Jews and putting them into like closed-off areas. And the time came for us, and they put us in that ghetto. And we were lucky that we didn't stay there too long. I think we were there about 3 weeks. Lucky. I wish we would have stayed there longer, because what came after was no picnic. So then all of a sudden they came banging on the doors. Rouse, rouse, out, the Hungarians and the Germans. But big dogs, I have a terrible fear of dogs. My kids could never understand why they can't have a dog. You know, when they were little, I couldn't explain. When they got older, I explained I have a fear of any dog, even though those were German shepherds. But when I see a dog on the street, I cross over on the other side. We always had dogs around us during the war. So they got us all out, and allowing only one bag. And as we were coming out, they were rushing us, and they were beating us all over the place. Whoever was close by got hit for, just for fun. And my father was knocked on the ground, and he was, he didn't have a beard, my father, but there were a lot of Jews with beards, and they were pulled by their beard, they were thrown on the ground and beaten and kicked, and it was like unbelievable. Anyhow, they took us to a place at the railroad siding. There was a brick factory, and a huge building with one big room, and they put us all in there. And that's where we stayed, on the floor. There was nothing there, just sat around.
How many people were there?
Oh, geez, I don't know, the whole town. There were 30,000 people, from what I understand, in the town of Munkacs, and half of them were Jews. It was a very large Jewish population. So 15,000 people herded into that huge place, and they would take the men from 16 years up, they would take them every day away to work. They'd come back beaten up and bloody and just awful. They made them do all kinds of carrying bricks and carrying stones, and it just was awful to see my father like that. And as we were there, we saw the trains coming from other towns passing by. In order to go further, they had to pass our town, our railroad, and we'd see all these people in these cattle cars. So my grandfather, they were on their way before us, because they were more, was it south? I don't know whether it was more north or south, I don't remember. And we knew that we were going to be taken to, we didn't know where. My father was an optimist. He said, don't worry, they're taking us to a labor camp, and we'll be okay. I think we were in that camp in that brick factory for about 3 days. And then they loaded us on cattle cars. Excuse me. They were clothing cars with little square window on one end, with bars, metal bars on them, steel bars. And they piled us up like you wouldn't like herrings. I mean, there was no room to sit. If one sat, people stepped on them, together with people who were sick, who couldn't stand. They emptied everything out. They had a sort of quasi-hospital in the ghetto And they emptied the hospital and piled the people in with the other people. My two sisters worked at the hospital. They were not qualified, but there was no one else. There were no nurses. After a while, they didn't get any. They got some medical attention from some of the Jewish doctors, but they weren't really allowed. They were not given any medicines or anything at that point. So anyhow, they wanted to empty the town, and they put everybody up on these trains. And we had no idea which direction we were going. And my father kept saying, we'll be okay, we'll be okay. And we tried to peek out the window, that little opening, and see whether you recognize anything, you know. The distances weren't that great, and my father traveled around to shop for his store, so he knew the areas well, but nobody knew, nobody recognized anything. And we rode like this, I think it was, I really don't know how many days, but people died people, I guess, from the hospitals. They died, and there was no room for them, and there was no sanitation facilities or anything like that. That was absolutely horrendous. The stench. It wasn't hot, but I mean, when you put together so many people, body heat alone is like over 100 degrees. It's just awful. So we finally, we slowed down now. We slowed down a few times, you know. They gave priority to more important trains on the tracks, and they would shunt us to the side, and we would wait. And finally, we arrived somewhere. I don't know where. We didn't know where.
Was there food?
No food, nothing. No food whatsoever. But we still had a lot of food that inside of us. I mean, we were okay. We weren't emaciated or undernourished. So we had no problems. Not really. I don't think so. I'm trying to remember. And we stopped, and all of a sudden those sliding doors on the cattle cars were open, and there were some men with striped uniforms opening these trains, and German SS with dogs again. Raus, raus, out, out, out. Get out, fast, fast. And the one of the prisoners, who were Jewish fellows, prisoners, came up as we were coming off the train and said to me and to my mother, "Say you are 18, you know." What happened was, we were only allowed to take what we had on us from the ghetto. So my mother put a lot of clothes on, the kids and herself, warm coat, and because we didn't know where we were going, and a scarf on the head, and a lot of sweaters underneath. So we looked bigger, you know. And I was tall for my age, although I'm short now. I think I'm shrinking. But anyhow, so, and we saw a line of SS, like a little alley they created, one standing on both sides of the street along the tracks, and people had to walk in between them, you know, down as you were coming off, slowly. And they would say, mothers and children and old people or people who are not well, to the left, and you will be going on trucks. The others will walk. So people, you know, like my aunts with her children and 2 sets of aunts and a lot of cousins, this side was for working, and this was to take it, not to work, but they will be riding they will be taken wherever we're going on trucks. So who can't walk, stay there. So what mother would give up her child and get the child go on the truck and have her go where you know? So all these young mothers in their 20s, 30s, with children, went on the trucks. We didn't know where they were going. We figured we'll see them later. When it came to us, I think Mother was 42, so she was okay. I mean, I was too young. All my classmates were not allowed to go through. They asked me how old I am. I said 18. And they let me go through to the working side. So my mother and I didn't have to go on the trucks. My two sisters had no problem passing. And that's how I got through when I really wasn't supposed to get through. Only one other friend from my class made it through, Ava, and she's alive today. Only two of us in the whole class. Anyhow, they made us line up. And we looked around, and it was so barren, all those wires, and we saw people in striped uniforms, and we saw huge chimneys spewing a lot of smoke, and also flames coming out of the chimneys. We figured it's a factory of some sort, you know, you go to work. And so finally they took these people on the trucks, and they went off, and we started walking into the camp. The railroad sidings were like sort of on the outside of the camp. And as we were walking there, we went through a big gate, and on there it said in German, Arbeit macht frei. Work liberates, or work frees you. That kind of our interpretation. And they took us to this camp. There were a lot of them. There were a lot of like partitioned camps within the camp. Each camp, like there was a A camp and a B camp, a C camp and a B camp and an A camp. In the C camp there were the gypsies. In the A camp there were Czechs or whatever. And we were taken to the C camp. And it had 10 barracks on each side, huge barracks. And we were like dazed, after the 3-day train ride. We tried to figure out, but there was no sense trying because you couldn't. I mean, they took us into these barracks. They had, on both sides, they had these, I can't call them beds, they were tiers made out of wood, 3 tiers high. And this is what was called our beds, our homes. Now, 12 in each with 1 blanket, okay? Down the middle of the block was made out of brick. There was an oven for heat, I guess. We never got any heat. And it ran all along the length of the block, and on that you could sit. That was the only place where you could sit, or sit on your bunk. Oh, a bunk. Yeah, 12-person bunk. 3-tier, 12-people bunk. That's the only way I can describe it. The beginning of the block was a little separated room, and in there was a nice bed for she was called the block Älteste. She was the head of the block. Each block had a head. They were older prisoners. Some of them were Jewish, some of them were not. And some of them were very cruel, and some of them were okay. And they made us pile up into these bunks in the middle of the day. There was hardly any room to sit up, just about cleared the top. And that was it. We didn't know from Adam. We just sat there and talked. And after a while, they made us all get out and line up in 5s. The whole camp, they called it Zählappell, which meant counting time, taking inventory of humanity. And we stood there for hours. Now, the Germans didn't count, the block Älteste counted, the block leader. And then they went to report to the front of the camp, to the Germans, that everything is correct. It stimmt. They knew exactly how many people, you know. You know, I skipped something very important. You see that? Can I go back? First, before they took us to that camp, jeez, how could I forget this? I'm getting old. I think that's what it is. They took us to an area and made a strip, took us into a big room and told us to strip totally and hang up, and exactly, there were hooks on the wall. They told us to how to bundle our clothes, hang them on the hooks, tie our shoes together, and where to put our shoes, so that we find them after they are being disinfected, so we should be able to find our things the way we left them. And that we're going to be taken to a bath to disinfect, and then we can come back and get our clothes. Well, that was a lie, obviously. The reason they were the Germans were very tidy people, very precise, and they had everything planned out beautifully for them. True, we were taken to the next room. Our hair was shaved, underarm hair, pubic hair, totally unbelievable. Shaved with a shaver, you know, just all the hair was falling, you wouldn't believe it. Then they took us into this room and they smeared us with a disinfectant, you know, all over. It was unbelievable. The smell was just horrendous. Then they made us go into another room and then outside, totally naked. And this was May, cold. This was cold country up there. This was Poland. Auschwitz, Birkenau. This was Birkenau. And then after a while, they started throwing dresses at us. You know, I don't know where they got them from. No underwear, not striped uniforms, which were at least warm, but they threw all kinds of print dresses, things in, they didn't consider size or anything, indiscriminately, big, small, whatever. So we got dresses and we put them on, and you wouldn't believe what we looked like. I mean, we looked at each other. I looked at my mother and saw her without hair. My sisters, we looked like, I didn't even recognize them. It was that bad. I got dressed, it was a zebra stripe. It was like a curvy zebra stripe dress, black and white, all the way down to the floor. So my mother ripped off the bottom and gave it to me to tie on my head. A little warmth and a little bone, and make a bow so it doesn't look so ugly. And the German came by and gave me a slap in my face and ripped that thing off my head and threw it on the floor. And we stood there for a long, long time, and then finally they marched us to that camp that I talked about before, to the sea camp, and got us into this room. By that time, it was like we couldn't figure out what the heck is going on, you know. And then we heard from prisoners who were there before, "You're lucky, you're here. See that fire in the chimney? That's where all your parents and grandparents are, and your children." You know, you could smell, it was such a funny smell, like a barbecue, burning flesh. It was awful. And there was like,
May 4th, 1995, survivor Elsa Federbush, interviewer Janice Sussman, Scarsdale, New York, USA. The interview is in English. Elsa, could you describe that further, your life in your barracks?
Yes. So we were put in these barracks and nothing to do. Just hang around, nothing to do. Talk, nothing to do. It's so bad. It's awful. People have no idea how awful it is to have nothing to do. You know, it's just, you can't brush your teeth, you can't do anything. It's just sitting. And when you sit around, you talk, and you reminisce, and you're waiting for it to be let out a little bit on the air, on the fresh air. Well, anyhow, as I said, they let us out, and counting time, say lapel. And if one count didn't tally, you stayed until that one person was found, or they wouldn't let you in until everybody was accounted for. So they would search the barracks, they would search on the bunks, and sometimes they'd find people, they were unable to get up and get out, very sick or dead, you know. So many times we stood out there like for 6 hours in the cold, no shoes. Oh, we had no shoes. They gave us these wooden clogs that were cut, like opening the toes. It was awful. So finally the tally was okay, we went back, we were exhausted, and then they brought a big, I don't know, a big steel drum type of thing with 2 handles, supposedly soup. It was as big as a drum, maybe not as wide, and carried by 4 people. It was too heavy to carry by 2 people. And in there was, don't ask what there was, it was slop. I mean, it was just gray water with some potato floating around, potato peels, and God knows what. But by that time we were so hungry that you ate what you got, and they gave you something that they called coffee. We had a little bowl for the soup and a little cup for the coffee. And it tasted so bad. I mean, but it was warm. The coffee wasn't hot, but it was warm. And the soup was warm. So we ate, and that was the first day, and we ate. Oh, and the bread was like sawdust. We couldn't eat it. You know, it like crumbled in your mouth, and as hungry as we were, we just couldn't eat it. So next morning, when we were out, we took the bread and threw it on the roof of the barracks because we didn't want the Germans to see that we didn't eat the bread, because who knows what they would do to us. So we threw it up on the roof. And believe me, about a day later, 2 days later, we went on the roof and we tried to get the bread back, and we ate it. You know, when you're hungry, you're like an animal. You're going like a prey, you know, like you have to. You got whatever you can do to get it, you'll do it, you know. So the next day, some people climbed up to get their money, to get their bread back and eat it. And it was worse than because it was up there like for 2 days on the roof. It was horrible, but we had no choice. And well, those bunks, let me tell you, we were on the top bunk. We were lucky because they kept breaking, and people would fall down on top of the people underneath because it was too many people. They were just wooden slats. They weren't even nailed together. They were just put on a frame with a frame around it, a little higher, and if you sat at one end, it would flip up and hit you in the head. So a lot of them, people were hurt. They were screaming in the middle of the night. You couldn't even sleep. And that's how it went on for the longest time, for months and months. No work. And then we already knew that there is a gas chamber and that there, In the next camp were the men. We were in the next, I think it was the B lager, B camp. The men were there, and there was a barbed wire, electrified barbed wire in between. And the men were trying to find their families, and the women were trying to find their men families. And nobody could recognize anybody because we were so changed, you know, no hair. And men had no mustaches where they had them, no beards. All these Orthodox Jews, no beards. All of a sudden, my father spotted us. And he said, in Yiddish, I'll say it in Yiddish and then I'll translate it, if I may. Oi, weh, meine Kinder, was hat man getan mit dir? Or with Ike. Oh, my poor children, what did they do with you? What did they do to you? And then he said, get out of this camp as fast as you can. If there is a transport going, try to get on this transport to get out of here. This is a death camp. So, and my brother was with him. But every time there was a selection for transport, there were a lot of selections. Mengele, Dr. Mengele was the head of our camp. And he would come whenever he felt like it and make us strip and line up all on one side. There were both sides had barracks. Everybody from one side of the barracks had to come over to this side. And he formed a sort of a little alley on two sides with the Germans, and we had to run naked across to the other barracks, and he would pick people out, you know, just out. One side, left side. You could see right away who was on the left. People who didn't look that great, or people who he didn't like the looks of, you know. And each time this was happening, you didn't know where you were going to go, whether you're going to end up left or right. I was very young. You could tell when I was undressed that I wasn't developed. I was 13 years old. So there was always a chance that I may be pulled out. So my mother and my sisters were always hysterical about me. You know, they were scared all the time. And each time we made it, it was like a miracle, you know, because we knew that the people on the left would be taken to the gas chamber. And so did the people. They knew it. So go do something. There was nothing they could do. And then they had another selection for people to go on transport. You didn't strip for that. But we were never picked. So we stayed in that miserable place for, my mother and I stayed there all the way till January 1945. And we went through this nerve-wracking business constantly, you know, these selections. One time and then Mother didn't look so good anymore either. She was 42, and she lost color, and she was, you know. My two sisters were at an age where they were okay. They were well built, and they were okay to go to work, to whatever. It was my mother and I that was a problem. So Mother would pinch her cheeks, you know, to make them red, and all kinds of shticks to help the situation, to help to get through to the right side. And we were never picked, so we stayed there. There were no facilities to wash. They had one block, which was a latrine and a washroom. The length of it was long. These blocks were humongous. I mean, they were so long, I really don't know how long they were. And there were holes, like seats with holes in them for the latrine, and parallel to that was a steel pipe with little holes in it with water trickling out, cold water. That was all the water we were able to get. So if they let us, and you only were allowed to go there twice a day to the latrine. If you had to go more than that, tough luck. So you stood there and you had to stay, and they didn't give us too much time to accumulate enough water in your hands, in your palms, to bring it to your face and wash your face, or to bring it to your mouth, to rinse your mouth. There wasn't enough time. So you grabbed as little as you could, and you went fast. So, you know, and at the beginning, a lot of people couldn't handle it, and they threw themselves at the barbed wire. They committed suicide. My brother had a girlfriend. She was beautiful, beautiful 18-year-old girl. 3 days after she was there, she went crazy. She threw herself. A lot of people lost their minds. It's a miracle that not more people did. You had to have, I don't know, you had to be exceptionally strong not to want to commit suicide. But you know, human beings, no matter how bad it is, you value life. You have hope that it's going to get better. Without a hope, there's nothing. And believe me, it wasn't easy to hope under these conditions. My sister, not the oldest one, the middle one, she was unbelievable. She was an entrepreneur. She wasn't afraid of anything. She ran around. She managed to bring food from somewhere. She went to the kitchen. She was beaten up. She went again. She was beaten up. She went and she found potatoes outside that they were throwing out or whatever. She brought it. She was the, and now we were 4 people, so they gave us the bread in one chunk, which was much better because we were able to slice it and divide it instead of giving it to sing. So my sister's sister, Alice, was the one who was the best slicer, the thinnest slices of bread. And I never forget, we tried to divide it for the whole day, so she cut them very thin, and my mother would look at her and she says, "This is not the way I cut the bread for you." You know, it's not that she was objecting to what she was doing, but she was lamenting. And she went to the electric fence, and she made conversation with the men. And these men had access to all the shoes that were collected at the gas chambers and clothes. They were working on, they were called the Sonderkommando. They worked of getting the bodies out of the gas chambers and putting them in the ovens, and every 6 months they changed them. They killed them. They didn't want them to survive to tell about it. So my sister became friendly with one of these fellows, and he kept throwing things over the fence for her. Sometimes they would get caught on top and would never fall. At other times she got them, and she would trade the shoes for food. She'd go down to where the kitchen was, where the non-Jewish prisoners worked. There were Russian prisoners and Polish prisoners. And she would bring back potatoes and cooked potatoes, and once they brought back farina, whatever, I don't know, but she managed to. And then she saw a crowd of people around a young woman who had her hair, but she was wearing a prisoner's uniform. So she sort of got closer and she was listening, and this woman spoke Russian. She didn't speak any other language. She was trying to find out that if there was anybody who spoke Russian. And my sister went to Russian school, so she was fluent in Russian. So she got to know her. Her name was Anna. And she really saved our lives. She said to my sister, asked her which barracks she was in. She says, "I'll come tomorrow and I'll bring you food." My sister told her that she's here with her mother and sister. Well, my sister promises. Sure enough, the next day, she sees her coming with a big pot, and she's looking, trying to find us. There was 1,000 people in one barracks. So my sister jumped off the bunk and ran to her, and she brought us meat, potato, and cabbage. The stuff they cooked for the Germans, leftovers. It was like manna from heaven, I guess you could say. And she did this for the longest time. She brought us every day something. And one day this fellow threw a scarf tied around a stone over the fence because its light couldn't get over. Beautiful cashmere scarf with roses on it. Big scarf. My sister was always looking to find something to give this Anna a present because she really saved our lives. So she took that scarf and she gave it to Anna at the kitchen. And she put it on and tied it up tied it on her head like the Russians do, going around the neck. And it was so big that it even went over her shoulders. She was thrilled. She never in her life saw anything so gorgeous. And my sister felt wonderful being able to somehow reciprocate. And she really helped us make it. Then, we got there in May, and around September, I think it was, there was a selection. They were looking for 50 girls, good-looking girls. They took my two sisters out of the selection. And rumors were going around that they are being taken to the German front for the soldiers. Well, my mother almost went out of her mind. I never forget that picture. They were loaded on a truck and driven down the road of the camp. And then out along the side on the road, along the camp, going down the other way, and my mother was running the length of the camp one way and the other way, crying, running. It was unbelievable. All of a sudden, we are left just the two of us. And it took my mother a long time to accept the situation. But our food supply ran out, so my mother started to be the one to go and get. She would volunteer to carry these heavy soup barrels to the blocks. It's very heavy, and it came from the bottom, from one end to the other. And she would get a little extra soup for that. She would go to the kitchen and beg. And then I got sick. I had, I guess you call it pleurisy. I couldn't breathe. And you know, if you get sick in camp, you're finished. There was no room for sick people. So she would prop me up when there was a count, Zählerpell. She would stand behind me and prop me up until the count came. And when they passed, I would flop on the, they were sort of hiding me. I couldn't sleep. I screamed all night. The people were mad at me because I disrupted their sleep. So there was one barracks was set up as an ambulance, they called it. It's like a mini hospital. But I don't understand it because sick people were not allowed to live. So my mother went over there to see if she can get me something, aspirin or something. And she walked in there and she sees that one of the women is my aunt's best friend from Ushhorod, Ungvar. And she was a doctor at home. And she was in charge of and my mother told her about me. So she says, bring her here. And she put me in there. And we were single bunks with covers, food, aspirin, nothing, no serious medication. And she kept me there till I was almost better. She saved my life. A lot of the people there were, it was a very contagious rash. I don't know what it's called in English. I never heard of it since then. In German, it's Krätze. I guess it comes from not being clean or whatever, and it's very contagious. So they put some people into that barracks, into the ambulance. They weren't considered sick. They were just considered in quarantine because of the contagious thing they had. And Mengele would come there to the hospital every once in a while and walk down the bunks, walk down the length of the barracks, and he would say, "What is she in here for? Get out, let me see you," you know, like this. I was like, I don't know. What am I there for? And she would walk with him, the Jewish lady, the doctor, would walk down with him, behind him. And he pointed at me and he said, "What is she here for? I don't see any kretze. I don't see any rash." So she said, "Well, she's all better. She's leaving today. She's going back to the barracks today." So he let that go. We got better food there. And I wanted to stay. I didn't want to go back to the barracks, even though I wasn't with my mother. But I was much more comfortable. One day she said to me, "You got to go back to the barracks." I said, "I don't want to go." She says, "You got to go. Don't ask any questions." Told my mother to take me back, and she did. In the middle of the night, we heard screaming and yelling and trucks and things, commotion, okay? I mean, the barracks were made out of wood. They were not brick barracks. Auschwitz had brick barracks. Birkenau had wooden barracks. So, there was no keeping the sound out type of thing. I found out the next day they emptied out the whole ambulance, hospital, or whatever you want to call it, and they took them to the gas chamber. She saved my life again. Now, she couldn't do it with everyone because the Germans knew that there were people there. That's why they came to get them. And that way she saved my life. So I was better, but I was awfully weak. And my mother made a friend. She was unbelievable. If not for my mother, forget it. I wouldn't be here today. She met a woman. Yeah. There was a block Älteste, a Slovak woman, in another block. And she noticed that my mother was always offering to help bring those heavy soup buckets up. She took a liking to my mother, and she gave her extra food. And mother would, bring it every day, and we would share it, and she'd share with other people. But she was she was always, Then I just remembered, my sister's friend worked at the kitchen from home, Jewish girl. And when she saw mother, she was, she spoke Hungarian. "Oh, Esti neni, Mrs. Esti, you're here. Where is Alice? Where is Mans?" So mother told her what happened. She said, "You come to the kitchen, I'll give you food." So she brought food from there also, as often as she needed. But then she was taken away on a transport, that girl, so she had to start scrounging around again, and this was going on all along. All of a sudden, towards the end, about October or so, they started taking us to work. Oh, before that, as I'm telling this, I'm remembering, because I don't go around thinking about this all day, every day. Every once in a while, they would tell us to take our blanket. We're going for a Umlausung, which means we had lice. We were crawling with lice. It was impossible to sleep. They were unbelievable. Between the mice and the rats and the... Anyhow, every once in a while, they would say, "Well, we're going to a disinfection and shower." Shower. No good. We never knew whether we're going for a shower or whether we're going because, the gas chambers were equipped with shower heads. And instead of water coming out of them, gas would come out of them. So when they said, "You're going for a shower," we didn't know whether we were going for a shower, really, or whether we were going to the gas chamber. So all this total anxiety, I never forget, we were walking with these blankets, trudging down. It was a long walk. and wondering whether we're going on our last walk or whether we'll ever be back, you know. Well, we were lucky. It was showers, and they disinfected us, and showers, warm water showers, unbelievable. It was unbelievable, but it was no good because the clothes had the lice in them. You know, they settle in the seams, the eggs. Ugh. You never saw anything so disgusting in your life. Anyhow, and around October, they started taking us to work to another camp, walking distance. And to this day, I won't know why they made us do that. We would sit at long tables, and they had thick pieces of rubber, like squares or long and about a foot wide, and we would have to cut ribbons, make them long strips, and then braid them together and roll them up into balls. Now, the scissors that they had were so bad, and this was so thick. I'm totally disfigured on my finger from the scissors. My mother, it was so blistered and bleeding, and you wrapped it up, and it was just awful. And my mother would do my work for me because I was in such pain that she would do me and for her. And I would try to do a little, and there were friends of ours tried to do a little for me, you know. And the Germans would come in and walk up and down and see how work is progressing. So this is the kind of work we did. But it was better than lying around in the barracks. And the road was very muddy. You know, it wasn't paved, so if it rained, it was nothing but mud. And these clogs that we got stuck in the mud, and we would like suction. Find ourselves stepping out of them and ending up in the mud with our feet, because they would be grabbed by the mud. We couldn't pick up our feet. And and that's where we stayed. Basically, this was the whole situation. It repeated itself daily. There was not much variety. The total anxiety of the selections. We heard rumors that Mengele is here. We knew what was going to happen. Every once in a while, he disappointed us and didn't come. Such disappointments we could have lived with a little more. And just, you know, what we did was we ended up talking about food. You remember how we cooked? We baked and we cooked. We remembered. You know, you're so hungry that you talked about recipes and how it was, and compared notes, how they did it in this town and how they did it in that town. We had to talk about something. There was nothing else to talk about. Then they organized a little singing group. We would sing songs from home, Yiddish songs, and then they put on little plays. You know, you try in that barracks. The people who you tried to find something to do to keep your mind off your misery, you know. And there were a lot of talented people. I mean, musicians from orchestras, piano players, violinists. They were all a lot of cultured people. You know, the Jewish people were very cultured. In Czechoslovakia, they were allowed to pursue anything they wanted in their lives, you know, not like in some countries, Jews were not encouraged to go to music school or to go to a conservatory or something like that. So there was a lot of talent, there was a lot of art. When they grabbed the little paper, they would draw pictures, and they would try to describe their families, their children, their mothers. And so there's always conversation going on. Otherwise, there was really very little to do. One day they took us also, and they decided that they're going to clear, there was a dried out riverbed that they wanted to clear out of the rocks and stones. So they walked us over there, and there was back-breaking. And you couldn't let up because they'd hit you. They were walking around with those whips made out of leather, And there was one woman, she's very well known, SS woman, gorgeous, beautiful blonde. She looked like a goddess. And her uniform was so elegant. And those starched light blue shirts. She had blue eyes. She always wore a light blue shirt with a navy tie and well-tailored uniform. And she had blonde, beautiful hair in a big bun in the back, low on her. And she was so bad. She was so mean. She would kick you until you're dead with her beautiful polished shoes, boots rather. And she was our, Mengele and she were our killers, let's put it this way. And she was in charge of the detail cleaning out the riverbed. How many people she killed right there and then was unbelievable. And you know something?
Elsa Federbush, interviewer Janice Sussman, Scarsdale, New York, USA. The interview is in English. Take 4. Elsa, you mentioned a famous SS woman. Do you want to tell us a name or more about
Yes,
that person?
famous, infamous, I would say.
Infamous.
Her name was Irma Greiser. And whoever was in Birkenau has heard the name. I think she was hung by the Russians when they captured her. But anyhow, she was a holy terror. We stayed there in the same camp till January 1945, going through the same routine. In 1945, January, we heard gunfire. The Russians were very, very close. And most people had gone from the camp. It wasn't so crowded anymore. Like, they kept taking transports, and we were still there. And we heard one day that they're emptying out the camp because the Germans don't want to be captured by the Russians. They would rather be captured by the British or the Americans. So instead of just walking out of there and leaving us where we are, they decided that they want to take us with them. And they started up this death march. I think there were about 5,000 people in that left at the camp. They made us line. It was snow. Of course, this was cold country. This is Poland, Obersilesia. It was cold, and by that time I had shoes. They weren't very comfortable. My sister managed to get me shoes from her friend across from the men's camp, but they were too small for me, so I wasn't very comfortable, but at least I was dry. And they started walking us out of the camp, and they walked us, no food, no coat. I don't understand how it's possible. I just, now, I thought about this many times. How is it possible that we didn't freeze to death, And we walked for days on end. Every once in a while, they would let us go on the side of the road to rest in the snow. We'd eat snow. That's what kept us alive. The water, the snow kept us alive. We walked like this for days. I lost count, really. We slept on the side of the road for a few hours, and it would make us go up again. Some people never got up from the snow. They never left anyone behind. If you couldn't get up, they shot you, and you went on. And this was going on for the longest time. At one point, and my mother had gotten somewhere some cubes of sugar. And she told me to hold it and put it inside my dress. There was a belt around it, so, to keep it for safekeeping. And at one point she asked me for a piece of sugar, and I lost it. I'll never forgive myself for that. She could barely walk, And I felt so miserable. That feeling I'll never forget. I lost the sugar. and she couldn't have any sugar. She tried to make me feel better by saying, don't worry, it's okay, you know, mothers. At one point they gave us some, I don't know how come, some raw peas, you know, the yellow dry peas. How can you eat that? I mean, we swallowed it whole, where you can't chew it. At one point they gave us some onions, you know, but there was no food at all. Every once in a while there would be an air raid, and you see the Allied planes flying overhead. They would make us go into the woods to hide because they were bombing and they were strafing, and they, the Germans, didn't want to be strafed. Then at one point they put us on a train. I couldn't believe it, a passenger train. Can you believe it? We made ourselves so comfortable. We took our dresses off and tried to get rid of as many lice as we could, and we were out of the cold. Unfortunately, the trip only lasted 3 hours. And then they made us get off again and walk again. I don't know why they interrupted the walk. And we were walking. All of a sudden, I couldn't walk anymore. I couldn't bend my legs. She just wouldn't bend. I was dragging them. And I said to my mother, I want to sit down. She says, you can't sit down. I said, I have to sit down. And she was pulling me. She said, you can't look. And I turned my head, and I saw behind us a woman sat down, and I saw the Germans shoot her like nothing, like, you know. All of a sudden I could walk. This is unbelievable. It didn't hurt me anymore. I was able to bend my legs. You want to live no matter how miserable you are, no matter how bad it is. You want to live. It's just, I can't fathom it, you know. And we walked some more, and one night they took us into, and we were, you know, we were fewer and fewer people because they were dying. You wouldn't believe how. And one night they took us into a barn with hay, a farm, warm and toasty and delicious. And we made us as comfortable for the night, as comfortable as possible. The cows were down on the bottom, and we were like a little further up in the hay. It was great. It was warm. My mother snuck out. She went to the farmhouse. And she came in and she went to me like this. So I went outside, and we went around the bend. Nobody should see us, around the back of the barn. And she brought hard-boiled potatoes and milk. Can you believe it? It was like, I couldn't believe it. And I ate, and she ate, and we ate. And we didn't want anyone, they would have attacked us and tried to take it from us, the prisoners themselves. I'm not talking about the Germans. The Germans went into the farmhouse. They left a couple of guards out, but they were, you know, fooling around, and it was like going towards the end, sort of, we thought. And so we had a good meal. And they didn't let us stay through the night, those son of a guns. They made, in the middle of the night, like, must have been like early dawn or something, they made us get up and get out. Something must have, the Russians must have been getting closer. They kept running away. And we walked like this for about 2 weeks. Then they put us on an open cattle car, no roof. And it was cold. It was so cold. It was snowing. And there was no room to sit down. And we found a little spot, and we took turns sitting. My mother would stand over me, and I would sit. But there was a hole underneath there, and the snow was blowing up my legs through that hole as the train was moving. And my mother was standing there, and then she was sitting, and I was standing. And then I looked at my mother at one point, and she looked like she was going crazy. She started mumbling. A lot of people lost their minds on that train. People started jumping out of the train. And of course, as they jumped, they were shot. They were losing their minds. And then I made her sit down, and I never let her get up. I made her sit down and stay there. It was a little better because you weren't so exposed to the cold. And then she fell asleep. She slept, I think, for about an hour or so for the first time in I don't know how many days. And when she woke up, she told me what happened. She said, I saw little people in my head. I saw people dancing in a circle, you know, and she was going out of her mind. Anyhow, then they got us off the train again, the few that were left, and we started walking again. And we walked. And all of a sudden we walked into a camp, Ravensbrück. There were so many people there. There were about 100,000 people in that camp. And as we walked through the gate, there was a pile of bodies about 3 stories high on both sides of the gate that have not been disposed of as yet. And men, prisoners, were carrying the bodies from that pile to horse-drawn carts. Well, we were people all over. I mean, it was like wild. And we were in this column of people, and all of a sudden they cut the column off and made us go in through a gate, steel gate, and the gate locked behind us. We were about 200 people. And we found out that it was a lunatic barracks for lunatics. So they gave us half of the barracks for us, and the other half was the lunatics. And we were not able to get out or anything. Food, they gave us a little bit of food, but the lunatics would break out and grab it from us. There was no beds. You were sitting on the floor, and we were in there for about a week. Then, all of a sudden, somebody came running, saying that my 2 sisters are there outside. Now, mind you, my sisters were taken away, supposedly to the front for the Germans. And here comes somebody who says that they saw my sisters, and that my sisters are outside the gate. What happened was every once in a while they took a bunch of people out on a work detail. So they opened the gates, unlocked them, and they lined them up to go, and then they changed their minds, and they were bringing them back in. And as they were bringing them back in, Mother and I snuck out on the other side of the column, snuck out and joined my 2 sisters. My sisters, they couldn't believe it that among 100,000 people they found us. They looked for a week for us. They went to every barracks and every nook and cranny, and they couldn't find us. And then they bumped into someone who was on the same transport as we were, and they knew that we were here. Anyhow. And then, of course, we stayed together for the rest of the stay. Then they decided to take us out again and walked us to a camp called Taucha. Nobody ever heard of that place. It was such a bad camp. It was terrible. There was absolutely no food. Luckily, we only stayed there for about a couple of weeks. Then they walked us again to another camp, which was a little better, called Malcho. I don't know. I don't even know how to spell it. It was so unbelievable. There we stayed a few weeks, and then they started walking us again, and they walked, and we walked towards Leipzig, which was a big city, and they were being bombed left and right, and they kept pushing us into the woods, and the bombs, the Russian Stalin lights, they were called, the flares flying all over us, and they kept walking us away to the Americans. Can you believe it? And we walked at one point, we passed Leipzig, we were walking over a bridge, and I started to cry. And my sister said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "I just want to have one day a whole potato, raw potato, that I can eat like an apple. In other words, not sliced, but bite into it." And she said, I was dirty. The tears were running down my face, making lines in the dirt on my face. She reminded me, she said, "You looked so terrible." I said, "Thank you." And it was unbelievable. When we passed that town, it was a huge town. I saw children eating ice cream and looking out the windows, watching us walking by, through all of Germany. And sometimes there were some nuns who gave us water at one point, and some German children wanted to give us some sandwiches. Their lunches, they were on their way to school in uniform, and the German wouldn't let them, took the sandwiches away from them. And we walked, and then finally, oh yes, then my sister saw some potatoes in a field. So she ran. She was never afraid of the Germans. I mean, she didn't care. She then grabbed the potatoes, and the German saw her, and he yelled, "Stop!" And she wouldn't stop. She was running away with the potatoes. And he kept saying, "Stop!" And everybody was telling her, throw it down, don't let him kill you, throw it." She wouldn't throw it down. Finally, she threw it down, but she was almost killed over those potatoes. I never forget that. Oh, and we ate, there was a very good grass, a very thick stalk. I don't know what it was, on the side of the road. We ate that all through Germany after it got spring and started growing already. It had a sort of a sweetish taste, and it was sort of juicy, so it gave us a little bit of moisture. You know, it was growing, couldn't be bad. Unless it was poison, it couldn't be bad, right? So we, at one point they said, okay, we're going to spend the night in these woods. There was no snow on the ground anymore up there. So we made ourselves comfortable. People started building fires, you know, to keep warm. And there were villages down at the bottom of the hill, and people started running. Oh, the Germans took their uniforms off at this point and wore civilian clothes, but they still carried the guns. So people got a little more, you know, courage, braver, or whatever you want to call it, and ran down to the village and went into to German homes and asked for food. And they came back, my sister came back with potatoes. We baked them in the fire, and with bread, and it was good. We felt that we were finally getting something human. And then all of a sudden, about 3 or 4 hours later, auf, get up, we're going, we're moving. So in the meantime, we also hooked up with my mother's half-sister, a step-aunt. My grandfather remarried. So we were 5 of us. 3 sisters, my mother and her. And my mother said, we're not going, let's go further into the woods. And we'll decide what to do after they leave. And they left, and we didn't have any striped uniforms, so we didn't look like prisoners. We may have looked like prisoners on our faces. And there were an awful lot of refugees all over the streets, all over the roads of Germany. And they were Polish non-Jews, Hungarian non-Jews, labor camps and all that. So we decided to go down to the village and say that we are Hungarians who worked in a factory, a war factory, and we are running away from the Russians. So we are refugees. We spoke Hungarian, we spoke German, and we wore long sleeves so the numbers didn't show on the arm. And we started eating. We started with the first house, and we went down the main street all day. It was a Sunday. And we ate through the whole town. Now, that wasn't such a smart thing to do, because my sister got so, you know, that created dysentery, because you are not used to all that heavy. They had pork and beans, you know, not pork and beans from a can, but they ate very heavy food. We started with cereal, with like farina, with raisins in it and all that, because it was in the morning. And we worked, and she got very sick. So we went to the Bürgermeister, which is the mayor of the small town or village or whatever you want to call it. And we said that we need a place. We realized it was night and we had nowhere to, you know, to sleep. We were eating all day. You know, we wanted somewhere to sleep. So we went to him and said, we need a place to sleep. So he sent us to a farm outside of town. And she let us sleep in the barn. We told them we were Hungarians. And she gave us some food, some potatoes, and they didn't have much at that point, and some hot milk or whatever. And we slept wonderfully. And in the morning, she gave us food again. And all of a sudden, she said, the Germans are, we hear that the Russians are coming. They are in the next village. We have to leave. They left their cattle, they left everything, and went away, and we had to go with them, because otherwise we could give it away that we are Jews. So we evacuated, ran away with the farmer and his whole entourage to a next town on horses and buggies. But the maid had to come back, one of the women had to come back to milk the cows. So on bicycles, my sister Alice and this maid, went back every morning to milk the cows. And one day, and there was no sign of the Russians. And one day, as they were coming back from milking the cows, they see these horsemen coming down the hill. They were Russians, with their guns drawn. And my sister speaks Russian, so she said, "Ya Yevreyka, I'm Jewish. I'm from camp." So they wanted to ask all kinds of questions, and then they let them go. So here, the girl, the German woman, was absolutely ashy. I mean, her face was white. They heard stories that the Russians rape and pillage, and they knew, she thought they were going to rape her or kill her, whatever. And when she saw that Alice did what she did and talked them out of anything, harm's way, they went back to that village where they evacuated to, and she told everyone. She told everyone about what she did, how she saved her life from the Russians, that she's an angel. And Alice said that they were going to, we were going to protect them from the Russians because she knows Russian. We didn't say because we are Jewish. So they decided to go back to the farm. We went back to the farm and the Russians went away. But she let us move into the house. She let us move in, gave us a room because we saved their lives. All of a sudden, the next day, the Germans came back. Okay? Now we had to entertain the Germans. Okay. Young kids on motorcycles, 16, 17-year-old German kids. The last bit they could produce. They wanted to know where the Russians are, so they told them that they went to the next village, so they went there the next day. They were all massacred. So they were all lying, all the German soldiers were lying there. Finally, the Russians came back and established a headquarters in that village and asked my sister to be a translator. Well, they went from house to house, from farm to farm. They took anything they wanted. They piled up, they looted, whatever, everything. Nothing mattered, old, young. They raped 70-year-olds, 12-year-olds, it didn't matter. They were like animals. Although they liberated us, they were petrifying. They didn't do anything to us because we were who we were. And they didn't do anything to our farmer because we wouldn't let them. Because they took care of us, and we did not want them to harm them. They didn't touch their livestock, they didn't rob them of anything. So we were like God to this farmer. They looted and they brought to us stuff from the Germans. Suitcases full of linens and crystal, and who needs all that stuff? And they insisted that we take it. Hats for mother and dresses for my sisters. And we put it all under the bed. You know, what are we going to do with it? We had no room where to put it. Anyhow, one day, and a British officer walks into the farm with a German woman and says that he heard that we have her stuff, that the Russians gave us this woman's, this was some rich woman, I don't know, her linens and things. And we pretended we don't know what he's talking about. The farmer already knew we were Jewish. So we let them into our room and showed them the room. And they opened the closets and looked under the bed, and they didn't see the suitcases. And they were there under the bed. It's just like things, it disappeared for a second. You know, it's very interesting. There were 5 huge suitcases under the beds, and they never saw them. They apologized and they left. Then we heard that in a town nearby, in a small village also, there's a bunch of people from camps. And we wanted to hook up with someone. We didn't want to be alone. We were afraid. There was a castle there, and the Russians established a major headquarters there. And then we sent a message, and they sent a cart and horse. And we put our stuff and the bicycle. My sisters got bicycles and all that, and we left that town. And as we were leaving with all the stuff, the farm lady said, "Oh, do you people have a lot of goods?" You know, like saying, "Hey, you really took everything you could from us." And we went to that castle, and we stayed there for a long time. My sister was a translator there too, and the Russians tried to have a relationship with my sisters. You know, they get drunk. You see, you had to drink with them. If they said, "Let's drink to Stalin," and if you didn't, you were an enemy. And they drank straight vodka. And my sisters, they don't drink. Well, anyhow, one officer got drunk and came and knocked on the door and he only wanted my older sister. He wants to sleep with her. He said it right out. And she said no, and she started running around, and he started chasing after her. And he wasn't very steady because he was drunk. So I pushed my sister into the other room, and I locked the door. And we climbed out the window, you know. There was one flight up, and we jumped into bushes to get away from him. And incidents like that, they would, one wanted to sleep with one, and the other one wanted to sleep. And I was always the one, because I was so young and nobody wanted me. I was scrawny and ugly. I was always the one who managed to get them out, distract them or get them out or whatever. And by the time we left, none of the Russians would speak to us. We created a situation where they did not want to have anything to do with us. But it was okay with us at that point, you know. And we took our belongings on these carts, on these pull carts, and we started walking to Czechoslovakia. We walked to Dresden, Leipzig. We were like 3/4 from Leipzig, close to Dresden. And we got to Dresden, I don't know how many weeks we walked, days. We stopped places where they had special places for refugees to stop. And we got to Dresden, and all the bridges were down. And we had to, in order to get to where we were going, we had to go on a boat. So before every bridge, we had to get out and change to another boat, then go to the next bridge. And this is how we worked our way to a train station that would take us to Prague. There were no trains running in Germany that you could take a train. They were all bombed, and Dresden was totally, totally destroyed. So we finally got a train, and we went to Prague. And in Prague, the Red Cross took over and billeted us, put us into Red Cross receiving stations, or whatever you want to call them. And my sisters on their bicycles rode into town, and there were so many of us all over the place, you know. And they were asking about survivors, my father, my brother. They were asking people. And there was a Jewish community center where bulletin boards were put up. And everybody put names, looking for this one, looking for that one. And one day they were in the city, and they were in this place where the Jews gathered, and there was an officer, a Czech officer in uniform there. And he recognized my sisters. He was from our hometown. No, he wasn't. He was at the yeshiva at our hometown. And he used to eat at our house, like you used to give, like a yeshiva student who didn't live in that town would eat in different homes on the days, you know. This was, and in holidays they were invited. And he would eat at our house once a week for as long as he was there. And he recognized my sisters, and he has been in Prague already for a while. He was the liberator with the Russians of Prague. He was the first troops in. So he had a gorgeous apartment in a beautiful modern home with elevator and things that we didn't know existed anymore. And he brought a Jeep and loaded us up from this Red Cross thing and drove us to his apartment. And then we were told, and we stayed there, and there were other girls there from our hometown. It was like he gave everybody a place to stay. It was a German apartment that the Germans evacuated when the Russians came in, left it fully furnished. They left everything, clothes and everything. And we were told that we can take any German home that we find, we can take for ourselves. So we decided to leave Prague, my brother and my sister, and in the meantime my brothers came up. My one brother who was saved by Wallenberg, Roald Wallenberg in Budapest during the war, he came to Prague looking for us, and my other brother ended up in home after the war, and he went home because he figured we'd all go home. No one was there, and he heard that we were in Prague, so they all came to Prague. And we went to a town called Liberec, which was in the Sudeten German part of Czechoslovakia. That was a part that was occupied, that was taken away even before the war by the Germans, sort of annexed, and a lot of Germans were living there. And we got a house with a garden and stayed there for the rest of the year of 1945 till the beginning of 1946. And that's the way it was. My mother and my sister stayed up in Prague in that apartment. He fell in love with my sister, this fellow from our country. And she and my mother stayed there, and my sister and my two brothers and I were in this town, Liberec, or Reichenberg in German. And then my sister got married to this man in, I think it was January or February 45. And they're still married. And that's about it. I mean, I think I covered everything. I may have left out certain things.